Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natasha Akery. I'm an English language arts teacher at Academic Magnet High School in South Carolina. And today I have the privilege and pleasure of interviewing Haleh Liza Gafori, who is a poet, a vocalist, an educator, a translator, and she is most recently known for her anthologies that she published in 2022 of works that she translated by the 13th century poet and sage Rumi. Today, she's going to talk to us about what teenagers can learn about love, beauty, hope, and friendship from a poet like Rumi. Haleh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I feel good. Thank you.
Awesome. It's such a pleasure to have you. The first question I'd like to ask is, can you tell us a little bit about your craft and your work as a poet, a musician, and as a translator?
Sure. As a translator, as you said, I've been focusing on Maulana Rumi. We call him Maulana. Iranians call him Maulana, and across the Middle East, essentially, he's known as Maulana or Mevlana in Turkey. But anyway, we call him Rumi when we're here for the most part. And so I have been focused on his work for the last 7 years or so. And he spiraled through my life. I heard him as a child, didn't understand really what he was talking about at the time, but remembered that there was something very magical about the poetry. I remember my parents reciting the work. Eventually, I would come to his translations, and then eventually, I would come to sing his lyrics. And I still very much enjoy doing that. I love composing songs using his lyrics. They were often composed while a drum was playing. So and spontaneously, in a way, he was freestyling, not for all of the poems, but for we don't know how many he did this way, but it seems like a lot. He would gather with friends, a drum would be playing, and he would start spouting poetry. And so there's a lot of rhythm and rhyme. And so they lend themselves to music because they started with music. Not all of them, but many of them. So anyway, it's fun to sing those. And I enjoy that. So I would say that at this point, I do a lot of performance art in terms of bringing in the poetry, the stories, the songs, and kind of weaving them together in a performance. And I travel to do lectures on the poetry, and sometimes do the performances at the schools as well. So that's what I've been doing a lot of lately. And what brought me to it was just simply curiosity and delight. It's just like so beautiful. So I kind of followed that.
The clips that I've seen of you in your performances, I love. You're very passionate, obviously, very expressive, which I think lends itself to the words of his poetry. And I love the use of the two microphones. The one microphone has the reverb on it, which is so lovely when you start singing. And I love how you weave in the commentary as well. It's such a nice kind of progression of introducing Rumi through the performances. It's so beautiful. What were you like as a teenager?
Well, I was a mixed bag, like anybody. I mean, I was excited and enthusiastic about certain things, and I was also very anxiety ridden as a child. So I was navigating that, and also, between two cultures. My parents came from Iran in the 70s, and I was a child between two cultures, not sure of exactly where I belonged, or, and so that kind of can create a confusion, and it can also create an interesting perspective of sort of being a kind of, in a way, outsider in both places, gives a kind of bird's eye view of certain things sometimes. I was also very much aware of global politics as a child. A lot of, families, I would say, from the Middle East, have had a awareness of what's been going on there, the wars and so on and so forth. And, it really impacted me in terms of it was disappointing. I mean, I think part of the anxiety as a child was, to be very frank, I was disappointed in the world. I knew that the Hudson River, which is a river that was near my house and is a huge river along, New York City, was very polluted, and so these things were in my consciousness. At the same time, there were all the wonderful things about our culture and American culture and Iranian culture that were weaving through this, and in a way dialoguing with it. So I think now, my work brings all of that, I think, to the page. So
You brought up politics too. I think politics are very much on the minds of teenagers today. Gen Z and Gen Alpha seem very inundated with everything that's going on all of the time. I don't know if they have the luxury of being able to turn it off very often. So
yeah.
I think that probably resonates with them as
I
well.
Yes, I really feel for students because I remember myself, and at that time there wasn't social media, so I wasn't seeing as much as teens and children see today.
Mhm.
And I really empathize with the difficulties of that. And we hope that we'll go in directions that are more loving, which is honestly one of the reasons that I translate Rumi. He's not an inaccessible saint and he's not presenting himself that way. I mean, there are many poems in gold where we see also his pain,
Mhm.
and his struggle. And that makes it all the more sort of receivable, I think, that we know that this person was human and this person understood the challenges when he says, for instance, "Dide por dard budam, kase zahr budam." Very shocking. An aching eye, seeing through pain, a stewing pot of poison. I was both. Reaching for the antidote, I touched compassion, I touched mercy. So it's like I mean, that surprises people that he would say "Kase zapu," a bowl of poison, a stewing pot of poison. What? Rumi? Yes, Rumi had his challenges and struggles, and the poem about being flung, like a ship into a sea of blood is in there too, where what is happening there is the fana. The word is fana, meaning the death of ego. So he's challenging us also to recognize, what part of us is trapped, confined, petty, right? And what can happen when we break through that, when we break through those chains, when we break through the mind forged manacles, when we break through the conceptions of self that are, based on dogma or, obsession with reputation. What happens when we allow ourselves to kind of be in a state of what he would call union and dissolution, um, in a shoreless, boundless sea of love, which is a tall order. And it's not something that we stay with all the time, but yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is part of our palette, and it's like how we enter that and how we stay there and how we work from there, how we act from there. That's what he's interested in. He's interested in the transformation, so there's a real muscle there there's a sweetness, and there's also like a real kind of history of understanding transformation and how we actually come to the sweetness, through sometimes the struggle and the difficulty and the awareness of it, because being human is not easy, and that's one of the things that the Sufi mystics, they never deny, is that this existence of being both material and spiritual beings, being both body and soul, is challenging, and so it's like, how do we then navigate that? And how do we then call upon the love, muster the love, uncover the love, as I say in the intro, the call of the central prayer: let me love more deeply, teach me
Mhm.
to love more deeply, uncover the love within me,
Thinking about how you highlighted the transformation, it brings me to a piece of trivia about you that I think my students might find interesting and wonder what the journey was. So your bachelor's degree is in biological sciences at Stanford. So
Mhm.
can you say just a little bit about why you made that choice then, how it still plays a part in what you do now, what kind of foundation it may have set? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love biology. Biological sciences are just an incredible field, and Rumi talks a lot about awe and wonder. And if there's anything that can bring us to awe and wonder, it's the natural world, and knowing about, oh my God, what are these mitochondria and these, doing, and these sodium potassium pumps in all of our cells are just working away. And so to know sort of these mechanisms and what's happening inside the body and bodies is so extraordinary. So I enjoyed biological sciences. I also, again, being from a, immigrant family, there was this push, be a doctor. Be a doctor. Hey, be a doctor. And it was like there was this, and both my parents are doctors. My sister's a doctor. Many people in my family are doctors. And I was kind of following along. I was not a rebel at that time in my teenage years. As I said, I had a lot of anxiety. So I was kind of a perfectionist. I was trying to like just get straight A's, and I wasn't necessarily feeling everything yet or feeling what I actually wanted to do. I knew I loved art. I knew I loved language. I knew I loved music, but I didn't think that I could necessarily follow that love. I didn't, I felt like I had to sort of do the thing that was expected of me. So anyway, it happened that the thing that was expected of me was also beautiful too. So I didn't lose on that journey. It was just part of the journey. And I got a window onto the wonders of science, and but then when I finished, it was like, okay, am I going to medical school? And I did go all the way, took the MCATs. I got into a lot of really good medical schools, and I sat there. I said, no, I need a year off. And then the year off became another year. And then I decided not to go. But, it took a while. It was a difficult decision, but there was something in me calling me, calling me, calling me, calling me to the arts, and to language and to music. And so I did follow that. And, in a way, there's a line in the book where he says, Shams of Tabriz, Shams is his friend, the mentor, the guide that brings Rumi so much knowledge and so much, well, more than knowledge, but like heart awareness, blasts him open to actually walk the talk, of the spiritual talk that he was doing because he was a preacher, he was an Islamic theologian, but Shams was like, let's actually live this. And so anyway, Shams is very important, but Rumi says, he knows the root and the cure. So in a way, I do think that this has a medicinal quality, this poetry. So I kind of became a different type of doctor, like
So lovely. I love
offering a
that.
different offering a different kind of medicine.
No, I love that.
More palatable. It's not going to taste bad on the tongue.
I'm thinking about my ninth graders. They are currently taking biology, all of them. I know it is so hard for them, but they are learning so much. And so hearing you talk about, mitochondria and that kind of thing, I'm sure they're all like rolling their eyes, thinking like, what do you mean this is beautiful? I hate this right now. But I love that you saw some beauty in it. I think what will resonate too with my students is some of that pressure that you were talking about, because many of them, because of the type of school that we are, they do have the expectation of academic success, pursuing certain types of professions after university, that kind of thing. I'm sure many of them are also hearing like, hey, how about doctor? Like I'm sure that's going on for them as well. So to hear what a lovely, like, kind of bringing it back around that you've become a doctor of a different sort through poetry. That's just so lovely. um, so let's get to what what my students and what teenagers in general, what does Rumi have to offer them that maybe they wouldn't think he has to offer?
There, as I said, he was a preacher and he doesn't really lose that voice. So he does give advice. He does tell us what to do. There's a lot of imperatives, in the book. And then he also, as I said, confesses his own struggles. So I think that, people can go to Rumi and, learn about love, feel more compassion, feel these sort of, he gives us images and mantras when he says, grudges and spite weigh on the heart. Let 7 streams of water wash them away. Make room for love's wine, be its cup. So this kind of idea of what are the waters that wash away grudges and spite from your heart? Can you lay down at night and visualize that? Does that help? It's a meditation in a way. It's an invitation, right? Because of course, so much is activated by the imagination. So much of our healing and our ways of being in the world is activated by how we see things. So when he says an aching eye seeing through pain, a stewing pot of poison, I was both. Reaching for the antidote, I touched compassion, I touched mercy. And then he says later in the poem, in the dirt, maybe he means in kind of the mess of life, or maybe he means really in the soil, or maybe he means, when I got humble and down on my knees. He says, in the dirt, on the path of love, I found the medicine that ensouls sight. When he says, see with the beloved's eyes, see one when your mind says two. The angels adore your love-drunk eyes. Or he says, your eyes are not a vulture's beak. So this idea of seeing, how are we seeing? There's a Chaquiquel is a language in Guatemala, not spoken by many people still, but I met someone who speaks Chaquiquel, and he said, do you know how we say, how are you? When we say, how are you? If you literally translate it, like, how are you today? We say, how are you seeing today? Mm. So how are we seeing each other? How are we seeing other nations? How are we seeing ourselves and people, the trees and the rivers? Are we interconnected? Then he invites us. Can you see us as one? He says, come out, come close. Why hide? Why deceive? You are me and I am you. Why get mired in all these me's versus you's? We are light upon light and the glass. Light passes through. Why muddy ourselves with a grudge? Right? So this invitation, now, of course, we are separate beings, of course. And yet, on some dimension too, we are one essence, he says, one intelligence thrust us into one curved cosmos. We are all coming from the same mystery, and we're all returning to the same mystery. We can't define what came before this chapter and what comes after, but we're all coming from, we are one in that regard. We have a soul energy. So he invites us to that. And what does that mean? Well, for him, it's very fulfilling. It provides a lot of relief from the things that may taunt us or cause anxiety. The materialism is a difficult thing to deal with. Hyper materialism, let's say. We all need things. We need stuff. We like books. We like walls and a roof. We're mammals with no fur. We need stuff in order to live on this planet. But what is hypermaterialism, right? What is an obsession with material? And does that really satisfy us? He asks us to think about that. What is the real gold? Gold is a material thing, or is gold a state of mind, a state of consciousness, a state of feeling and being? And if it is this latter, which he would say it is, that's the real gold, the heart energy, this state of relaxed existence where we're not on a battlefield with ourselves or with each other, where we're not constantly obsessed with separation, but we see ourselves as friends, as one, as connected to the rivers. Why would we pollute that river? How could we pollute that river? It was a mindset that enabled us to pollute that river. Mm. It was a mindset that enabled us to dump 1.3 million pounds of PCBs into the Hudson River and kill the fish and make it make it a toxic river. What kind of action? Where's the logic? Where's the love in that? We can ask first, but we can also say, and where's the logic in it too? Because all that abundance that the river provided is gone. There were lots of fish. It was incredibly abundant. Now they've been cleaning it up, but I tell you, it's been decades long, and it's not easy actually to clean a river and take it back to where it was. So Rumi's invitation of inviting us into, let's not value material gain and profit over interconnection. So that is a continuous thread that runs through. He says, when the soul energy talks, says, wonder abounds beyond fear of loss and lust for gain. you know so he questions the lust for dominion and the lust for gain. And I think this is valuable for us as we move into these new chapters of human existence. We can't This old way doesn't sustain. It doesn't preserve the environment, and it doesn't preserve wellness. And I want people to feel good. I mean, this book has so much, when he says love opens the clenched body, lets the soul breathe, you know, love is an ocean, no borders, no shores. Every religion has love, but love has no religion. Love is an ocean, no borders, no shores. The idea of, there again, another image, another meditation. What is this shoreless, boundless sea of compassion? It's something you can take your little ladle to and drink from.
What I heard because you kind of had a two-parter there about our interconnectedness as beings to one another, but then a greater interconnectedness that deals with like the physical world and the realm that we embody. So when I think about my students and how I see them interact in the hallways and in my classrooms, and I get familiar with some of their conflicts and some of their divisions and that kind of thing. And as teenagers developmentally, there is stuff going on in their brains where they're like, I'm different, I'm separate. This is what makes me different from you, et cetera. I think it's a very human thing too, to separate and divide and classify things into groupings because it makes you feel more safe for whatever reason. But it sounds like Rumi invites the possibility of thinking about, well, aren't we safer if we're together? Aren't we safer if we see each other as connected, as being one? And I think some of my students might kind of be like, this is like getting really touchy-feely, that kind of thing. But there's something to be said for just also, because you brought up logic earlier, the practicality,
Yes,
honestly.
yes,
It's
yes.
practical to be loving. It's practical and it's logical to
Indeed. Yeah,
work together with others and to see ourselves in others so that we can move forward together and achieve goals, so we can take care of this planet, so we can,
that's right.
yeah, yeah.
Have better lives. Coordinated effort, collaboration, relational over transactional. These things matter. Of course, there's always going to be transactional stuff, of course, but that's not the center of it. That's not going to bring us to the good stuff, the real gold, right? So, yes, indeed, it's logical and practical. Love is a logical and practical choice. And I really, really believe that. And I'm glad that you said it, because it's so true.
Mhm.
And, I want to share a poem that you made me think of. He said, well, I don't need to read it. I have it memorized, but he says, let's love each other, my friend. Let's cherish each other before we lose each other. The recognition too of mortality, a hard thing to recognize for people. Nobody wants to think about mortality, and I don't think people should think about it all the time or every day, even, or maybe not even once a week, but have it in the back of your head that we're not all here forever. So he says, let's love each other, my friend. Let's cherish each other before we lose each other. You'll long for me when I'm gone. You'll make a truce with me. So why put me on trial while I'm alive?
Mhm.
Why adore the dead, but battle the living?
Mhm. And that's
You'll
so important in our like social media culture, everybody trolling everyone, everybody roasting everyone, bullying each other in the comments. It's so relevant. It's
yeah,
so relevant. I have found in my years as an English teacher that students more and more and more are really intimidated by poetry just generally, because the intimidation comes from very often a lack of understanding. A tip that I give to my students is every time you are given a poem and you were required to do something with it by some teacher, probably me, at least read it 3 times. And I promise you by the third reading, you have something. There's something in it that is going to seed itself in you, and you will be able to speak on that at least. And so something to that effect, what would you suggest for teenagers who are just like, oh my gosh, not another poem. I don't understand what's going on.
Don't give up on poetry just because you read one poem that you didn't like or didn't understand. There's many different types of poems, and you will find, I think, poems eventually that you resonate with, because poems are, you know, it's my dear poetry mentor said, poetry is speech. It's talking. It's a person in their most idiosyncratic voice communicating with, hopefully, with their intelligence and their love, their creative spirit. They're telling the truth about some experience. They're rewriting a moment. They're trying to reach across the page maybe and show you something that struck them, right? And so you might be interested in what this person struck by over that. So in other words, that's one thing, is to recognize that there's a wide array of poets, right? And so that's one thing. But also, I think that it's nice to read poems aloud. I think sometimes poems need to be read aloud. Sometimes when you read a poem on a page, it might be one thing. Then read it aloud and see what happens to it. And also, I would suggest hanging out with friends and taking 3 books of poetry, put them on the table, and then each of you picks one at a different point and opens to a random page and read it out loud, pass it around, have each person read a stanza, just like play with it. It's so much fun, and you will discover things about human existence, about feeling, about, so much sometimes from one little poem. So I would just say, yeah, just give it a chance, explore it, play with it, speak, recite it out loud, and do it with your friends.
I appreciate the word play very much. And I think that's a good reminder for me as a teacher, and probably for other teachers who might watch this. There is such an emphasis on assessment and on analysis and on standards and that kind of thing. So remembering to allow students to play with text and to explore text, and for the stakes not to be so high so that they feel unafraid of maybe making mistakes with it or seeing something that otherwise they might not see because they're so focused on being right.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Focused on being right. That's the beauty too of poetry, is there's no right or wrong. It's like there's no right or wrong when the poet is writing the piece, and there's no right or wrong when the reader is interpreting and understanding the piece.
Mhm.
We come to the poem how we are in that moment, who we are in that moment. We might read a poem when we're 15 and then read it when we're 35 and hear very different things.
Mhm.
And you might sit with a friend at the age of 15 and you too might have a very different interpretation of the poem. That's what makes it so exciting and fun. I think talking about poems is one of the most delightful things I ever do with my time, and hearing what other people have to say and what other people notice is very interesting.
I know I said that was the last question, but I do have one follow-up because it's a word that has come up a couple times um, in our talk. And I know it's a word that our students are familiar with, and it's anxiety. So my last question is for my very anxious babies who I teach every day and
I
have
get
that
it. I
pressure
was
on
there.
themselves, and they're trying to make straight A's, and they're frustrated over midterms and that kind of thing. You being you having been that student and
I
knowing
was.
exactly where they were and having gone on to Stanford and gotten a degree, and now you are this translator and this poet and this performer, what can you tell these precious little children about anxiety?
Okay, the very first thing that came to mind was get your blood flowing. Go outside for a walk. If you're doing sports, get your blood flowing. How, if you don't like to do sports, you might like to just ride your bike or take a walk or have a little short run. It's very important to get the blood flowing. That's something that I learned eventually. And it actually does wonders with anxiety, because you want the heart to be pumping and you want the blood to be flowing. That helps push through the stuckness of anxiety. Also, also, anxiety is a lot about the mind writing negative possible happenings. This might happen, that might happen, this might happen. Doom-ridden thinking. The Persians call it vasvas, doom-ridden thinking. So Rumi says, take the cotton of the mind's doom-ridden chatter out of your ears. So, learn to not listen so much to the voices that are doom-ridden, and say, that's just one possibility, that's just one voice. I'm not going to listen to the doom-ridden voices, or the doom-ridden voices even on, perhaps on social media. I know there are a lot of things that are not imagined that do suck in the world and can cause a lot of anxiety. Believe me, I have a lot of empathy for what you all experience as teens, especially now with the proliferation of guns and availability of guns, everything. It's a lot. Climate crisis, it's a lot. Y'all are dealing with a lot. And I love you. I don't even see you, but I love you and feel for you. And I want to say, keep your focus, on things that can bring you life, because we need you healthy. We need your positive energy too. You have every right to grieve. You have every right to be nervous about things. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But also give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to feel good, and to take care of yourself and take care of your mind. Meditation is helpful. Sitting down for 5 minutes in the morning. Can you imagine 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, to just get some quiet in your mind? Long exhales. That's all you have to do. Inhale 4 seconds, exhale 8 seconds, and let that calm come into your being. That's another thing that's really helpful. I'd say read Rumi. Rumi is very helpful, very nourishing. And I would say also, don't worry so much. Listen, I want to tell you, I was straight A's. I got into Princeton and Stanford. I didn't get into Harvard. I was very upset. I hit a wall. I punched a wall when I didn't get into Harvard. I was so mad. And then I, went to Stanford, and, none of that sort of, I missed out on being so worried and perfectionistic. I missed out on certain things. I missed out on the relaxation and on the camaraderie that comes when we do allow ourselves relaxation. So just remember the importance of that. Remember to balance it, and don't worry so much, because as I said, I wanted to go to Harvard. I was bio major. I didn't even end up doing biology. Now I did something else. So there's a big mystery that awaits you, and allow it to unfold, and trust yourself. Trust the way things move. Trust that life has its movements, and you'll be okay. Even if you don't get into Harvard, you'll be okay. And the funny thing is I did eventually get into Harvard. I got into Harvard Medical School. My grandmother was calling me from Iran. How can you not go to Harvard Medical School? Because that was the moment where I steered, I pivoted. So the funny thing is then when I got into Harvard Med School, or got into Harvard, it was like a kind of a curse. It wasn't a curse, but it was a privilege. But it was like it wasn't right for me. It wasn't actually my destiny. So in other words, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. And to the parents too, I say, don't worry about it. Because you can go to any school. What matters is your attitude. If you read Malcolm Gladwell, he was a great, I think it was an essay on this. What matters most is your attitude, your curiosity, and what curiosity eventually may develop into passion. You don't have to stress yourself out about passion. Just plain old humble curiosity. Let that drive you, and the delight, because that will lead you to a place that you want to be, and remember, people can go to these great schools, and if they have attitudes that's like perfectionism, and they burn out, so it's very important to keep balance and allow your curiosity to lead you. And it doesn't matter really what school you go to. Again, as Malcolm Gladwell said, matters your mindset and your attitude. And I would read Rumi. That's it.
Awesome. That's it. That's all.
Hey, it's not a lot.
Well, Hala, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon and
Pleasure.
sharing your wisdom and your beauty and your hope with us. I'm really excited for my students and my future students in years to come to learn from you. So thank you again for your time.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you. And hello to all of you students. I wish you the best.